Hi, Ellen and Jennifer of Yoga4Caregivers. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hello. Hey.
Hi. This is so fun because I was sharing with y'all before, but this is the first time that I've had two people on the podcast for Zoom. I have done one like in person sitting with multiple people, but this is the first time we've done Zoom. So I'm always up for trying new things. So, and you ladies look like you're ready for some adventure too.
Yeah.
So we always kick off something that before we get into everything from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. So wanted to just kind of get things off on the right foot here with some positivity and some words of wisdom and inspiration. So this actually it's the word stress, and it says stress equals someone trying to repair every situation solo. Stress, someone trying to repair every situation solo. That's what stress stands for, according to this slip of paper. So what do y'all think about that?
Well, for me, I think it's pretty true, especially when it comes to caregivers, because I think sometimes we don't always reach out. We don't ask for help. We don't really even know that we need help. So I think that definition of stress is pretty on point as a caregiver for sure.
Yes. I felt like, I don't know if misery likes company, because not everything about caregiving is miserable. There's lots of joy in caregiving, which hopefully this podcast helps illuminate that. But it is, when I get myself stressed, that a lot of times it's because I have a worry. And then if I take some action or work with somebody to figure out what that next action step is, that can alleviate some of that stress. And I know we're going to talk, Ellen and Jennifer, a lot, a wonderful way that you all help provide caregivers to alleviate stress with Yoga4Caregivers. But before we get into that, I wanted to first just get into your stories a little bit. So whoever wants to go first, Jennifer, why don't you go first about what your personal caregiving experience is?
Sure. Well, my personal caregiving experience is mostly in the professional realm. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by background, and I've spent nearly 20 years serving veterans and families and caregivers in their healthcare system. Personally, my journey in caregiving is just beginning as a long distance caregiver. It sort of started before COVID. My father, who's a veteran, and is experiencing some mild cognitive impairment. And, I'm not quite sure what type of dementia or what's going on. So I'm still very much in the early stages. And there's some shame actually associated with that. And, being in a family that likes to try to keep things private, it's a struggle, I feel like, sometimes to try and speak out about it. Family dynamics, right? A lot of caregivers experience this. And so I'm just in that early journey.
How about you, Ellen?
Well, my caregiving, I'm a mom to two boys, so I do a lot of caregiving. But my main role of caregiver started when my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2015. And I was a part-time caregiver to her for the rest of her life until she passed in 2018. And after she was gone, my dad was dealing with kind of end stage COPD. So I was his main caregiver until he passed in 2020. So I'm definitely I'm doing the whole sandwich generation situation for several years, taking care of my parents, taking care of my little ones. So I definitely understand what it's like to be a caregiver. And I used a lot of the tools that I learned through my years of yoga practice and yoga teaching to kind of help support me through those years.
It's so good. Well, a lot of what both of you said I can identify with. So Ellen, you have had examples in your life. My mother-in-law had lung cancer. My mom had COPD. And, I tell people that what prompted Happy Healthy Caregiver is that I saw these three people, my dad had other comorbidities, diabetes, they were morbidly obese, but it was lifestyle choices that essentially put them in this situation. It wasn't something that just kind of happened to them. Like in your case, Jennifer, with some of the cognitive things that are going on, nobody asked for that type of thing. And sometimes it's not, there's nothing really you can do lifestyle related to potentially help with that, although that some people say differently. But that is what inspired Happy Healthy Caregiver, because I thought if I didn't start prioritizing self-care, it would potentially be repeating things for my kids. And I didn't want that to happen as a sandwich generation caregiver. And then my role now, Jennifer, is as a support long distance caregiver for my brother who has developmental and intellectual disabilities. I just learned he's really neurodivergent. This is like a word I just heard about, like an umbrella term for people who are on the spectrum or who have ADHD or OCD and some of those other types of divergent brain things happening. So anyway, it's a different role, and then when you said about your family being in private, I mean, I'm one of 6 kids. We all do things a little bit differently. I'm pretty much out there. Like, what do you want to know? And at first I was very reluctant to share about my mom and but then I just asked her and she was comfortable with it. And very proud. And even some of the things that I didn't say that were necessarily very, positive about the situation, she just was respectful of the writing and the sharing, and I think everybody's got to make that decision for themselves, and with their care partner. But I had found, and maybe people are listening that are a little more reluctant to be vulnerable and share, but I had found that if I was more vulnerable and authentic, that I would see myself more clearly. Like, it helped me process the journey of caregiving. But I totally get what you guys are both saying. How did you meet? How did you guys meet?
We met through my online community, which started at the onset of the pandemic. And Ellen had joined the community and people were just starting to matriculate into our group on Facebook. And I just happened to notice that Ellen was a yoga teacher. And I was like, wow, so, here's a yoga teacher has come to this group, also a caregiver. And I just reached out to her and we just connected over Zoom. And it turned out we had a lot of things in common. We both went to the University of South Florida. We were both studying social work. We both had a little bit of caregiving background at the time, and both interested really in providing yoga services to caregivers. We just shared so much.
Yeah. And where do you both live? Jennifer, where do you live?
I'm in the Tampa Bay area.
Okay. And Ellen?
I was in the Tampa Bay area, but almost a year ago, I moved to Oregon. So now I'm in Oregon.
Holy moly. You went out there. Yes. That's exciting. And Jennifer, you'd share that your caregiving experience is really just kind of starting. And we call that, when we get our training as a certified caregiving consultant, we call that like an expectant caregiver phase or a freshman caregiving phase, where you're really just, trying to figure it out before you become I don't want to scare you, but entrenched is the next phase. So, which it's hard when you kind of see this mudslide coming, but I'll tell you, you're more prepared than most. But what made you, Jennifer, want to get into this caregiving space and start Yoga for Caregivers when you weren't necessarily living the caregiving life?
No, I wasn't personally living the caregiving life, but I was living the policy caregiving life, right? So I had been providing direct services to caregivers. I was a social worker. I'd been a hospice and palliative care social worker. So I've definitely had experience with caregivers firsthand in the community. And as I moved throughout my career, I ended up supporting the VA's National Caregiver Support Program. And I served on that leadership team in Washington, D.C. for about 10 years on that program. So driving healthcare policy for caregivers and education and training for caregivers, and just a wide variety of things in the office. And in 2019, I was feeling burned out, and I decided that it was time for me to kind of just step back and take a sabbatical. And as I was gearing up for this, I entered into a yoga teacher training because I figured I would use yoga to help me deal with work-life balance and some of the burnout that I was having as a professional. And I decided to go for the teacher training because I was worried that I would hurt myself. And I was not a yoga student, before really. I'd taken some classes here and there, but I was ready to go all in because my burnout was saying, okay, you need to change this up big time. And it was so transformational for me that I just knew that this would be helpful. I mean, after I finished the teacher training, I quit my government job and I was just like, okay, I'm ready now to just take a pause. Why am I on this, rat race? And what I was sort of reevaluating the things that are important to me in life. And just as I did that, COVID was around the corner. And so now I really wanted to be back in the healthcare system, and I was trying to figure out what can I do that, can provide support in a way that's helpful and aim that towards caregivers. And that's when I thought, caregivers can really benefit from the tools that I just learned. I had so much personal benefit and I just wanted to share. That was really the catalyst.
Oh, that's great. It's great. And you're how to bring your experience and apply it to something really practical. And I think it was the divine timing of what we needed during the pandemic. Ellen, what you had mentioned kind of when we talked about the stress quote in the beginning about how yoga has helped you, but when one of the things I try to do in this podcast and through the content is that I don't want to should on caregivers and let the you should take care of yourself. We're already doing a lot in a caregiving community, and so I want this podcast to really reveal the secrets of how people like yourself who've got a lot going on, Ellen, and like how are you able to infuse your practice and your time for your business into your life along with juggling these other responsibilities?
Sure. I mean, balance is key. And I really feel like I learned that more with the more I had on my plate. So when I was taking care of both of my parents, especially when my mom was on hospice and home, I was there. I would take my kids to work, take my kids to school, maybe go to work, go to my mom's house, take care of her, pick up my kids from school, and do all that evening stuff with the little kids. And in that day, I had very little time for myself. There was no like luxurious hour or hour and a half that I had to do a full yoga practice or, whatever it is that I wanted to do that day. So I really learned how important it was to take little breaks. Like, okay, she's taking a nap now. I can go take 15 minutes and either sit outside, or maybe I do a little yoga practice. Maybe I just do a little like deep breathing, just kind of reset myself. But I had all these ideas that I had to do these certain things for self-care. I had to take out an hour. I had to do this. I had to do that. And those things just weren't working. It was kind of making me more stressed out to try to do these things. And then I realized that I could just kind of sprinkle it in. And the sprinkling in really helped turn down that volume of overwhelm and worry, anxiety, a lot of anxiety. So if I could just sprinkle it in whenever I could, whatever it was that I could do, it really made a difference by the end of the day. Now, did it make it easy? No, definitely not. But did it make it so I could continue on the next day? Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And that's really what helped me kind of through that whole time period.
I appreciate how you say, that it was stressing you out to think you had to have like this big chunk of time, and that really that we got to get creative. And Dad used to always tell me that busy people get more done. And I think that is true because you don't have time to kind of like sort it all out. It's like, oh my gosh, here's a gift of 5 or 10 minutes. Like this is an opportunity to put some self-care in there in some nooks and crannies of your life. I know for me, I didn't start a yoga practice before I became a caregiver. And what I did is I heard, I would hear people say, well, this works for me or this doesn't work for me. And I thought, well, let me try on this yoga thing and see what it's like. And then, as I got into it, I had a Peloton bike. So that was an easy entry point for me, as they, if you have a Peloton membership, you can take some of their classes. And then I started learning that there's different kinds of yoga, like that's, that it's not all, in fact, one of my favorite things to do is the restorative yoga, which is really like a holding the stretch and the meditative type of yoga. And so it's not just like a one size fits all thing, which was a neat discovery. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But Jennifer, I want to get your thoughts too on like what Ellen was saying is like, what could 5 minutes of self-care look like?
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And when I was first starting this community up, I mean, I was consulting. I had started consulting a little bit, and I was actually consulting on a caregiver project that was working on a self-care curriculum. And when I had proposed, hey, I think we should include some mindfulness and some yoga, I think caregivers could really benefit. I was told caregivers don't have time for yoga. We're not going to include this. They don't have time for yoga. So there was this perspective that was out there that caregivers were not interested, that caregivers weren't about to go to yoga class, caregivers don't have the time for this. And I just thought to myself, this is just so not true. And our community has really shown that over time, because we've just grown and attracted more and more caregivers. And we have classes that are short as 5 and 15 minutes. So that's exactly what we're talking about, is taking these micro steps to wellness that Ellen mentioned, just sprinkling it in and getting it where you can. And when you do that regularly, those things can really add up over time. And so that's what I think is really important, that you don't need to dedicate an hour. That's sort of a myth. You just need to be engaged in some sort of regular practice.
Yeah. And isn't it just like perpetuating the problem that we have, is that, and I do share this, like when I speak to groups of people, is like, you are not really going to find the time, to take care of yourself. You have to be intentional about it and carve it out and create it. And a lot of what I do in my coaching is helping people figure that out, how they can put their systems in place so that they can create this time for themselves and what that could look like. And a lot of that has to do with saying no and delegating things and being okay with done and not perfect. And so many different things, I think, get wrapped up in that. What has surprised you about yoga for caregivers? And you'd said it's like, obviously there is interest in it, but what was your expectation of it? And is that matching it, or is it different than what you thought?
Well, so a caregiver told us early on how grateful she was for our support group. And that was really sort of stunning to me, coming from a professional world and running psychoed groups for caregivers. Our community was really nothing in my mind that was considered a support group. But she said, I've been in group after group, and all I hear is horror story after horror story of, people going through early onset Alzheimer's. And she basically said, that's not what I need to hear. What I needed is just this 5 minutes of, mindfulness and peace. And that really struck a chord with me, saying, okay, caregivers are really getting a social connection out of this, and they're finding it very supportive in a way that I really wasn't anticipating. And so that immediately kind of motivated us to kind of keep going and cultivating this community.
I think it's perfect. We talk about the categories of self-care a lot, and Happy Healthy Caregiver. And you guys are incorporating a lot of the different categories. You've got the physical self-care, obviously, the emotional or mental self-care that comes along with breathing and calming your anxiety. So that's 2. You have social self-care, because you're doing it as a part of a group. And I would even say financial self-care, because you can't beat free. There's nothing better than that. And maybe even some others, but definitely you've got half of the categories, I think, for sure. What does self-care look like for you all? I know you're running your business, but what does it look like for you? Ellen, you first.
My self-care, you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, that you wanted to take care of your physical health because of, what you were kind of seeing around you. So for me, my physical health is really important to me. I definitely want to live past my parents' age. So I work out a lot. I do yoga. I walk a lot. Like I walk my kid to school every day. So those kinds of self-care things are definitely my priorities, and really spending time outside. That was kind of one of the reasons we moved to Oregon. I know it sounds weird. Why would you move from Florida to Oregon to go outside? But we just really wanted to go on some different adventures and really explore and try new things. So that's also part of my self-care, which is really just reaching out and trying new stuff and, really trying to live my life. That might sound strange as a self-care thing, but it really is. Those are really my main things that I do for self-care: physical activity, being outside, spending time with my family. And that really helps to fill my cup so I can then, give as much as I can.
Nice. How about you, Jennifer?
I like to try to get out. I would agree, getting out into nature. So if I can get to the beach, I'll try to do that. But also, I really enjoy like just listening to music and, just taking some time to decompress and having a happy hour with a girlfriend if I get lucky, to see somebody. Because I spend a lot of time. I work from home, healthcare consulting from home. I'm trying to run this business from home. So I spend a lot of time indoors. So if I can get out, see other people, to sort of energize me, that's what I'm doing for self-care.
I like it. For folks, I mean, I want you to share a little bit of too about yoga for caregivers, but first, hopefully we've got some people in there that aren't just completely afraid of yoga, but if there's someone's thinking about getting started, like what would you recommend for them?
Well, do you mean on yoga for caregivers or just kind of in general?
Anything, yoga for caregivers, yoga in general, like if they've never done yoga.
So what you mentioned earlier was great, that there's so many different kinds. And I think sometimes what we see in the media, social media, magazines, whatever, it seems really intimidating. Like, I know my body doesn't move like that. So this is definitely not for me. But I would encourage someone to find something short, a short practice. That's why we offer a lot of those things on Yoga for Caregivers. We offer some really short breathing practices, which is a really great way to kind of reset that stress switch. So to switch it back to that relaxation response in your body, kind of switch back your nervous system to find that relaxation, releasing tension in the muscles, helping with digestion, helping with sleep. Just taking a few minutes of breath or learning some different kinds of breath work can really be helpful in all those areas. So I would say, if you're intimidated, if you don't know where to start, find, a beginner's class or even a short class where they maybe kind of an introduction, where you just kind of learn the basics. What are these different breathing techniques? What are these things? What are these names that people say all the time? Just kind of learning how to move your body in ways that feel good to you.
There are some really funky names, I will say. But you start catching on, and you learn the different poses of things. Jennifer, talk about your yoga for caregivers schedule. Like, how do you all put it together? What kinds of things do you aim to have in your schedule? I know I try to catch them and share them on Instagram in particular, but what does that look like, the schedule? What could people expect to find?
Well, we are really so fortunate because we have a variety of really seasoned yoga teachers who so generously give of their time and talents to support us. And every week, Ellen actually works on the schedule, but Ellen works with the teachers and comes up with the schedule. And it just blows my mind because we have such a variety of different offerings, between breath work and mindfulness sessions to chair yoga, restorative yoga, gentle, slow yoga. So we have somatic yoga. So we have all these different types of activities that we're exposing caregivers to help, cultivate a practice. And So there are a lot of different offerings, and some of those offerings happen through Zoom. Some of them happen just through recordings or through live sessions in our Facebook community. And we also, at one point, we were offering Qigong, and we also had offered tapping, and we still offer emotional freedom technique tapping. And so we're really trying to bring in some different integrative health modalities beyond yoga. And so that's another thing that's sort of unique to our community too, is that we're really, Yoga4Caregivers is doing more than just yoga. And we also have a component that's yoga off the mat as well that we are trying to integrate into our community.
That's great. Are the classes free? I thought they were free, but are they free?
Yeah, we have free classes in our online community. We also work with partners to have sponsor classes. So we have private sessions. So we have private group classes as well. And we spent the last year providing classes to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation.
Yay.
So we got to provide classes to caregivers of wounded warriors, which was great. And we also provide classes to healthcare organizations. So we're supporting medical frontline.
Yes, y'all, if you're listening and you have a group that can sponsor these ladies for Yoga4Caregivers, they give so much to their community that it's a nice way for you to help them and support your own organization. So I think that's wonderful. I kind of have the same type of structure for my business where it was always hard for me to charge individual caregivers for things, but I wanted other people to pay for it. You've got to be compensated for all the things that go into running your business. But for me, that's through paid speaking and paid partnerships with people that allows me to provide a lot of the content and things. So we've got that in common there too. Well, perfect.
We're really working on just sort of evolving our model, right? Because we've gone from like a crisis mode during the pandemic. We've been up for 2 years. We've been offering these programs, expanding wellness and making our classes so accessible and free. But we are trying to evolve into the social impact business and to garner more of those sponsored opportunities and put more infrastructure into what we're doing, because we have been functioning with no website and through word of mouth and through our social media this entire time. And, of course, if we had more visibility on the internet, I'm sure we could, reach more caregivers, but it all requires funds, right? And so we're getting there slowly, but that is our plan, is to move in that direction over this next year or so.
Yes. Well, one of the things I recently started doing was to become a champion with caregiving.com. So I do a lot of different things, probably too many things, frankly, but I can't help it. I just get so excited about it. And what they're trying to do is build some infrastructure because, as caregivers, all of our healthcare stuff was so fragmented that we don't want the resources for caregivers to kind of follow in that same footstep. And so Christina Keys is leading the charge for caregiving.com. We have champions in different cities and online resources as well. And the thought is that someone will go into caregiving.com, eventually put in their zip code for free, and they will see, vetted listing of people like yourself and other products and services that would be great to help caregivers, because not everybody, like you said, has this budget where we can just pay for, paid advertising, but we have a lot to offer. So that's one thing that I can share more about how you can get a listing on caregiving.com. But I think that would be one way to kind of bring more focus. And then I was thinking too, while we're talking, so I have virtual cafes that I've been doing every other month, and I try to make them fun. They're support groups, but fun. We've had a dance party. We have a sing-along coming up with Bridgetown Music Therapy that might already happened by the time this airs. But I would love for you all, if you're interested, to come and do an event with me where we do some yoga together as a group. So I see head nods. Yay! So watch for that. We'll get that happening later this year.
Oh, great.
Anything before we go into the lightning round? Are you guys ready for the lightning round of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast segment? So these are just prompts from my book. I wrote the book with caregivers in mind, but it's for anybody who's looking to prioritize their self-care. And I'm going to just alternate questions for y'all. So let's see. Which one of you like to cook? Either one of you? Ellen. Okay, Ellen. All right, not me. I like to heat and eat pretty much. But Ellen, what is your favorite healthy homemade dish that brings you comfort?
I make this lasagna soup in the crock pot, and it's super easy, very yummy with some like crusty bread, and it's my favorite.
Maybe if you could take a picture of that and put it in the show notes page, because that's what everybody's going to say. I want that lasagna soup
Yes,
recipe.
you bet. It's my favorite. My mom used to make lasagna for me all the time, and it was really like a treat. So I found out this recipe, and it's so easy, which is my thing because I'm not really very good at cooking. So I do
Yeah,
it.
I'm really good at eating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
I've perfected that. Okay, Jennifer. Um, what is one of your top tips to bust stress?
Oh, a top tip to bust stress. I think really getting out into nature because it just helps for me so much. Feeling the sun on your face, even for just a few minutes, just kind of re-energizes you. I can feel the difference just by getting out into nature. And I know that there's a lot of evidence-based research behind that too, but just taking a walk,
I
you
do,
know.
I mean, I make myself do it. There was a social post lately where it's like walking for my self care or what my mental health or something, something that went viral recently. And but I do feel like that sometimes I've got to like, okay, it's just stop everything and just get outside. And like you're saying, Jennifer, I come back and I'm a completely ready to face what's next. And so and I've got two dogs and one of them's way more active and she needs that sunshine time too. Sunny, her name is. Sunny needs her sunshine. And so does Elizabeth. So we get 20 minutes is the goal in the midst of the workday. Perfect. Ellen, where do you turn for support in a difficult situation?
Mostly my husband. My husband's a great support. I'm
Hey.
really, really grateful for him. Yes, he is. He was definitely my rock during the very challenging years. And really, I like to reach out to people that understand what I'm going through. I think that's really helpful. So if I know someone, whether it's a friend or acquaintance or a family member that's kind of going through the same thing that I'm going through, I like to reach out and get advice or, like, is this normal? Like, what did you do? Just to kind of get some ideas so my brain doesn't have to work as hard.
Yeah, well, particularly like in caregiving, caregivers are the expert for sure. And then when you said your husband, like we just celebrated our anniversary, and I've been thinking a lot about like the vows that we take when we get married and how they say in sickness and in health, and we automatically kind of think like, of course I would be there for somebody if they got some disease or this or that, but I feel like they need to blow it open into a checklist, and it should say, addiction, depression, some kind of other mental health type of thing, or whatever diagnosis, that, but not just for our partner or our spouse or whoever, but also for our family members, because all of those things can also happen to our members of our family and if we love them, then that also impacts that whole circle of everything. So that in sickness and in health thing, that's a big deal. And it just feels like it's just like glossed over in these vows. So
Yes, I think especially if you get married young, you might not have the idea of what's coming.
what's coming? Life is messy, but it's those messy parts that kind of make you whole and the people that we all turn out to be.
That's for sure.
Because I think a lot of beautiful things do come out into that adversity. I know that's been me for my caregiving experience. I wouldn't scrap it. It's, made me who I am. Okay. Jennifer, something people say helps them be happier or healthier that you personally have never tried.
Oh, I don't know. Probably a lot of things. Hmm.
When you mentioned tapping earlier, like that's something that's been
Yeah,
on my mind.
but that's actually a good one because I never was introduced to tapping until the pandemic. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know what it was, and I'd never tried it before. And we had a workshop with a yoga teacher who was certified in it, and she shared it with us. And you immediately felt the benefits. right during the session. And we've been able to share this with caregivers now. And one caregiver told us that, she had a lot of anxiety when she would go to the doctor's appointments that she had. And in the waiting room, by the time she got back into the physician's office, she would have that white coat high blood pressure. Right. And so she would tap. She's like, oh, I went back. I tried the tapping and my blood pressure went down. And so when I went into the physician's office, I didn't have that anxiety and have the high blood pressure. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. One simple strategy that a lot of caregivers already put into use.
I try to always try another strategy before the medication strategy, because it's like I find that in my reality of what I've seen with my family members and with my own self is like once you get on these medications, you don't really come off of them. So, and not that I'm anti-meds, but it's just like I'd love to try other things that could potentially help in a situation like that. So that's a great advertisement for the tapping. And then you had mentioned a couple of different types of other yoga that I'd never heard of, like the not systemic or Reiki, or I don't know what were some of the ones you'd mentioned. I was like, what is that? Like all I know is restorative, power yoga, slow flow, like the ones that they share on. And it's really, there's some forms of meditation in there too. So
yep, for sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it was this somatic gentle
somatic.
yoga.
What is that?
That's what it was. It's moving. I guess, Ellen, I don't know if you have a better description than I would, but I would just say moving your issues through your tissues through these very small movements, I think.
I like your phrase. I love little phrases like that. Moving your issues through your tissues, people. Not your snotty tissues, but your body tissues.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What are you guys excited about with Yoga for Caregivers? Like what are some things that you're thinking?
Well, we're getting ready to offer some new courses and workshops, and just trying to get ready to put a website up. And so we're, like I said, we're working on our infrastructure and, trying to figure out how we're going to offer a variety of different classes in support of really holistic wellness for caregivers. That's really the goal. So we're hoping to partner with a nutritionist as well. So we want to expand the types of disciplines that we have in our community that offer supports and really complete that holistic wellness wheel with the different offerings we can provide.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Well, there's a lot to be excited about. How do people find out more information about you both and Yoga for Caregivers? Like where should they go?
They can go onto Facebook under Yoga4Caregivers. They find us on Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can find us there. We're on Instagram, Yoga for Caregivers. We have a Twitter presence as well. So I think that's it, right, Ellen?
Anything you would add, Ellen, or any last words of wisdom? Anything that you're like, oh, we cannot shut this podcast episode down without saying this?
Sure. So yes, especially with Facebook, we have a page that everybody can join and see. And then we have a private group. So if you are a caregiver and you want to have access to all the free classes, then you just join the private group, and that's where all the free classes are. So that's really important. And I guess I wanted, the thing I'm really excited about is growing more community. We have a monthly session called Caregiver Connection, and either we have people come on and talk, or it's one of our volunteer teachers that comes on and kind of introduces themselves. And it's an opportunity for caregivers to all come together and kind of chat about whatever topic we're talking about that day. And though I really, really love doing those, I really love the opportunity for the caregivers to come together, even though it's all virtual. I think for the last 2 years, we've really been trying to figure out how to create a community in a Facebook group. And I feel like we're finally starting to do that more and more. And I think as we are more vulnerable as teachers and leaders, our caregivers also feel safe enough to do that as well, and kind of reach out and talk and discuss. And that's really something I'm excited about, hopefully continuing to grow, and more caregivers can just kind of join together and help each other out. And that's really what we're there for as well.
I think it's great. I love how you are just both of you all in the business that you have. Yoga for Caregivers is a great compliment to Happy Healthy Caregiver. We are very aligned on all of our messages. And so I look forward to continue to amplify what you all are doing. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being on the show and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Yes. We'll see you all online.
Bye.